Foreign tropical storm Ophelia is heading up the east coast after making landfall early Saturday near Emerald Isle, North Carolina, delivering heavy rain, strong winds, and coastal flooding well beyond its center across North Carolina and Virginia. As many as 70,000 homes and businesses lost power, and as of Saturday afternoon, about 42,000 remain in the dark, according to utility tracking site Parlage. U.S. storm surge flooding of more than 3 feet hit coastal North Carolina, where water was seen covering roadways. 5 people were rescued from a boat anchored in rough waters near Cape Lookout, North Carolina. States of emergency were declared in Virginia, North Carolina, and Maryland. 2 MLB games have been postponed: Braves Nationals in Washington, D.C., and Diamondbacks Yankees in New York. The tropical storm roared ashore around 6:15 a.m. with 70 miles per hour sustained winds, just shy of hurricane strength. By 2 p.m. maximum sustained winds decreased to near 45 miles per hour, though the tropical storm force winds extend up to 320 miles from Ophelia's core. The National Hurricane Center said it is expected to continue to weaken as it moves farther inland, but power outages could grow as it affects more areas. Ophelia is on track to move across eastern North Carolina and then travel through southeastern Virginia before heading farther north across the Delmarva. Overnight, and winds gusting to 73 miles per hour hit Cape Lookout along the state's outer banks. The high winds and rain caused treacherous conditions off the coast of Cape Lookout, prompting the rescue of 5 people, including 3 children, from Lookout Bight Friday. Officials said the group had been aboard an anchored sailing vessel that was beset by weather conditions with 35 to 40 miles per hour winds, according to a news release from the U.S. Coast Guard. The conditions at the time were 6-foot to 8-foot seas with occasional 10-foot swells. The Coast Guard release said the owner of the vessel did not feel comfortable in the channel and requested to be rescued. The Coast Guard said no one was injured. Residents of Washington, North Carolina were warned to avoid the downtown area on Saturday as about 3 to 4 feet of storm surge from Ophelia sent waters over the city's boardwalk area. A city Facebook post read: about 40 miles south in New Bern, which sits along 2 rivers in North Carolina, about 120 miles east of Raleigh, roads were flooded and water crept inland as the levels rose in the downtown area. City officials said on Facebook photos posted on the city's page show a flooded children's park and ducks floating down the street on floodwaters. Emergency crews in New Bern barricaded flooded areas of the city, including Union Point Park, which looks like a lake. City officials said Saturday morning the flooding began on Friday when roads were submerged in communities along North Carolina's coast and coastal Cedar Island. Water collected on Highway 12, though it was open and passable, the state transportation department said, but please don't go out tonight unless you absolutely have to. There is sand and water on the roadway, and it's dark and stormy, the department said in a social media post. Water levels also rose overnight in the Chesapeake Bay along the coasts of Virginia and Maryland. If you can avoid driving or being out during the storm, please do so. We are expecting an extended period of strong winds, heavy rainfall, and elevated tides. Maryland Governor Wes Moore said places in eastern North Carolina and southeast Virginia could see between 3 and 5 inches of rain, with locally higher amounts. Other states in the mid-Atlantic could pick up 2 to 4 inches of rain Saturday night through Sunday. Meanwhile, 1 to 3 inches of rain are forecast across southern New York through southern New England beginning Saturday into Monday. 1 to 5 feat of storm surge is possible in some coastal areas, particularly in inlets and rivers from around Surf City, North Carolina to the Virginia. Tidewater storm surge flooding could peak Saturday afternoon with another high tide, particularly in the lower Chesapeake Bay. The storm will also bring dangerous surf and rip currents along the east coast through the Haynes said Saturday morning the governors of North Carolina, Virginia, and Maryland each declared a state of emergency on Friday, and several weekend events were canceled in Washington. The Nationals baseball team postponed its Saturday game until Sunday. The North Carolina ferry system has suspended service on all routes until conditions improved. Nancy Shoemaker and her husband Bob stopped to pick up sandbags on Friday in a park in Maryland's capital Annapolis. A surge of water during a storm last October washed away sandbags they put in their yard, which is right next to the water. We're hoping it won't be that way this time, Nancy Shoemaker said. If we have a lot of wind and a lot of surge, it can look like the ocean out there, so that's a problem. It is not uncommon for 1 or 2 tropical storms or even hurricanes to develop right off the East Coast each year. National Hurricane Center Director Michael Brennan said, "We're right. At the peak of hurricane season, we can basically have storms form anywhere across much of the Atlantic basin." Brennan said in an interview Friday scientists say climate change could result in hurricanes expanding their reach into mid-latitude regions more often, making storms like this month's Hurricane Lee more common. One study simulated tropical cyclone tracks from pre-industrial times, modern times, and a future with higher emissions. It found that hurricanes would track closer to the coasts, including around Boston, New York, and Virginia, and be more likely to form along the southeast coast. Several airlines, including Delta, United, and Southwest, have issued travel advisories warning of potential flight delays along the east coast due to severe weather. On Saturday morning, severe flooding occurred in the coastal town of Belhaven, North Carolina, due to storm surge from Ophelia, which made landfall about 60 miles to the south. The staff of the Mad Batter Bakery in downtown Belhaven filmed footage as they checked on the premises during this time. Downtown Belhaven is flooded. No water in the bakery, but there's no getting to it. They wrote on Facebook, "We did have to secure some things in case the power goes out, but promise we drove slow, only went to the bakery, and came back home." Storm surge was already seen less than an hour after landfall at Union Point Park in New Bern, North Carolina. Storm chaser Mark Sudduth said ocean water was coming up quickly as the wind pushed it right up the river. Storm chaser Oliver napped and said conditions in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware were beginning to deteriorate quickly Saturday morning. When you're between the buildings it's bearable, but as soon as you step out into the open all hell breaks loose, he said on X, formerly known as Twitter, along with a video showing the rain and fierce winds whipping. An officer in Greenville, North Carolina rescued a dog from flooding caused by the high tides and heavy rainfall. Police said the dog was tied to a fence and could have been inches from drowning. The dog was taken to the local animal services facility where he will be cared for until police can sort out who the owner is. Ophelia has been on cyclone naming lists for many years, but has never been retired. It's now the 15th named storm of the busier than average Atlantic hurricane season. In the 1980s and 1990s, hurricane seasons never reached the stage of using Ophelia, due in part to reduced tropical cyclone activity. During the decades, however, in the 2000s, there was a flurry of activity and Ophelia made its presence known at least 3 times across the Atlantic with impacts felt in several countries, including the U.S.